Have you ever wondered why some women leave a mark on a man's soul and others just fade into the background? You've been told to be confident, but not too bold. To stay soft, but not weak. To be everything, yet not too much. It's exhausting. And somewhere in all that noise, you start to wonder, what if being unforgettable has nothing to do with trying harder and everything to do with remembering who you already are? Carl Jung believed that deep within each of us lies a powerful, feminine energy, one that speaks directly to the unconscious mind, not through force or performance, but through presence, depth, and truth. Today, you're not here to chase attention. You're here to awaken something more lasting, something real. You're about to explore 7 traits rooted in ancient psychology and real human connection that don't just attract, they leave an imprint. Stick around. This might be the moment everything shifts. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room. She didn't wear anything meant to turn heads. Her smile was quiet, her eyes calm. And yet when she left, no one could stop thinking about her. Have you ever met someone like that? Not flashy, not trying, but unforgettable. It wasn't the way she looked. It was the way she felt. Like someone who had nothing to prove and nothing to hide. Carl Jung had a word for what made people like her so compelling: the shadow. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is the part of ourselves we've been taught to suppress: our anger, our shame, our desires, our fear. All the messy human things we try to bury to appear more acceptable. But here's the truth: what you suppress doesn't disappear. It leaks. It shows up in ways you can't control, sabotaging relationships, dimming your light, and keeping you locked in a role that was never yours to begin with. And the more you hide from your shadow, the more forgettable you become. You've probably been encouraged to show only your good side, the polite, pleasing, smiling version of yourself that knows how to read a room and make everyone comfortable. That version may get applause, but it rarely gets remembered. The magnetic feminine begins where pretending ends. The first sign of a woman who leaves a lasting imprint on a man's psyche is this: she embraces her shadow. Not in rebellion, not for shock value, but with honesty and wholeness. She's done hiding the parts of herself that feel too much, too intense, too complicated. She's not interested in being perfect. She's interested in being real. And it shows. There's something undeniably powerful about a woman who knows her flaws and owns them. She doesn't apologize for her fire. She doesn't sugarcoat her sadness. She doesn't weaponize her charm or minimize her strength. She simply allows herself to be, fully, without permission. That's what draws people in. Not performance, not perfection, presence. When Jung talked about the shadow, he wasn't warning us to avoid it. He was inviting us to integrate it, to meet it, because only then do we become whole. Only then do we tap into the kind of feminine energy that doesn't need validation to exist. Imagine this. A woman walks into a room. She doesn't demand attention. She doesn't fill silence with noise. She just arrives, grounded, self-aware, deeply rooted in her own energy. And without saying a word, people notice. They can't name what it is, but they feel it. That's not charisma. That's embodiment. You don't chase light. You are the twilight, mysterious, still, complete. It's not always easy to live this way. There's risk in showing who you really are. Vulnerability feels dangerous when you've been taught to armor up. But there's also freedom. And there's a strange kind of beauty in knowing you're no longer performing for anyone, not even him. So ask yourself, what part of you have you been hiding to fit in? The part that cries too easily. The part that gets angry when told to smile. The part that wants more than just being nice. That's your shadow calling. Not to shame you, but to remind you that you were never meant to be a watered-down version of yourself. The first feminine trait that makes you unforgettable is not something you wear or say or do. It's this: you stop running from your darkness. You turn and face it. And in doing so, you become whole. Because when you bring your shadow into the light, you don't become less feminine. You become more real. And nothing is more magnetic than that. Softness has been misunderstood for too long. You've heard it be strong, be independent, be unshakable. And of course, there's power in standing on your own. But what happens when softness is mistaken for weakness? When receiving becomes something to be ashamed of, Carl Jung offered a deeper lens. He believed every man carries an internal feminine image, what he called the anima. This image is not just a fantasy or ideal. It's a psychological compass, drawing men towards certain energies that awaken something ancient and emotional within them. And what the anima responds to most deeply is the quiet, unshakable power of receptivity. That's the second trait that makes a woman unforgettable. She receives without guilt, without grasping, without apology. But let's be clear, this isn't about passivity. It's not waiting silently, hoping to be chosen. It's not shrinking or fading into the background. True receptivity is active, intentional. It's knowing your worth so fully that you allow things to come to you because you know you don't have to chase them. Think of it not as an open door flung wide, ready for anything and anyone. Think of it as fertile soil. Receptivity is the feminine art of discernment. The ability to say yes to what feeds you and no to what drains you without hardening your heart in the process. But the world rarely teaches women how to receive. Instead, you've probably been praised for giving more than you had, for staying strong when you were exhausted, for being low maintenance even when your needs were screaming. You've been told it's noble to expect nothing and serve everyone. To ask for help is to risk judgment. To desire more is to be called difficult. And so you learn to tighten, to apologize, to stop asking. But something inside you never forgot. You know what it feels like to crave softness, not as a weakness, but as a sanctuary. To feel the safety of being held. To trust someone else's strength without fear of losing your own. That's what receptivity gives you, the power to feel safe being open. I want you to picture her. She's in a group conversation. She isn't the loudest. She doesn't interrupt. She's not trying to dominate the space. But when she does speak, everyone listens. Why? Because she doesn't need to be heard to feel worthy. She's not chasing approval or attention. Her stillness speaks volumes. Her presence is grounded. She's not grasping for the spotlight. She already owns her value. There's a reason men remember women like this. They carry a kind of softness that doesn't bend under pressure. It absorbs, it reflects, it allows. And it challenges, in the most subtle way, the masculine urge to conquer. Because the truth is, deep in the unconscious, men long for a connection that isn't won but received. Jung's anima represents more than romance. It's the part of a man that helps him grow, mature, and integrate his emotional world. When you embody true receptivity, you awaken that process in him. Not through control, not through manipulation, through simply being open without shame. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you allowed yourself to receive something beautiful without guilt? A compliment, a moment of rest, a gift, affection, admiration. Did you deflect it, shrink from it, brush it off? Or did you breathe it in, let it land, and let it fill you? This is not a call to be less independent. It's a call to expand the meaning of strength. Because being soft in a world that tells you to harden, that's a radical act of power. And the woman who dares to receive stays in the memory of everyone she touches. He didn't expect to feel anything that night. They were just talking. Nothing dramatic. No raised voices, no tears. But when she told him what it felt like to be abandoned, not with bitterness, not with blame, just with calm clarity, he fell completely silent. Something about her broke through his armor. She wasn't trying to be strong. She wasn't hiding behind a mask of, "I'm fine." And she wasn't demanding sympathy either. She simply told the truth of what she had felt, raw, real, and without apology. And that silence he fell into? It wasn't awkward. It was reverent. That moment stayed with him not because of what she said, but because of how deeply she let him feel it. This is the third unforgettable trait, the courage to be vulnerable, to own your emotional truth without dressing it up, without watering it down, and without trying to make it palatable for someone else's comfort. Carl Jung believed the path to becoming whole, what he called individuation, was the integration of all parts of the self. Not just your logic and strength, but also your sensitivity, your pain, your grief, especially the parts you've been told to hide. In a culture that rewards emotional detachment and labels vulnerability as weakness, choosing to feel openly is radical. And it's magnetic, because most people are starved for emotional depth. And men, in particular, are rarely given permission to access that part of themselves. But when a woman stands in her truth, when she allows herself to be seen in her raw, unguarded humanity, something shifts in the people around her, especially in men. Because in that moment, she gives them silent permission to feel, too. She becomes a mirror, and not the kind that reflects appearance, the kind that reflects the soul. The woman who dares to say, "This hurt me," or "I felt alone," or "That mattered more than I admitted," without needing someone to fix it or rescue her, is unforgettable, because she reminds others what it means to be real. And that kind of presence lingers far beyond the conversation. Think about it. Have you ever felt like crying in front of someone but stopped yourself? Have you ever swallowed your truth because you didn't want to be too much or too dramatic? What would have happened if you didn't? Maybe they would have seen you more clearly. Maybe you would have felt more free. We've been conditioned to believe that being emotionally open makes us dependent. But real vulnerability isn't about spilling every feeling. It's about being emotionally honest without needing approval. It's about letting your heart show, not for attention but for connection. It doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're brave. And there's a quiet kind of power in being the person who refuses to numb out. Because the truth is, everyone wants to feel something real. And when you show up emotionally alive, when your joy is radiant, when your sadness is sacred, when your pain isn't hidden behind a smile, people remember. They remember how you made them feel around their own emotions. That's the alchemy of the feminine. You don't manipulate emotions. You awaken them. You don't cry for sympathy. You allow your tears to tell the truth. You don't pretend to be okay when you're not. You trust that being real is more impactful than being perfect. And in a world that teaches people to numb, scroll, and distract, your depth becomes a kind of medicine. So if you've ever wondered why a moment of vulnerability can echo louder than 1,000 performances, here's your answer. People may forget what you said, but they'll never forget how they felt when you let them see the real you. She never asked too many questions, yet somehow she always seemed to know the answers before anyone else spoke. It wasn't that she stayed quiet. It was that her silence carried weight, presence, depth. You could sit across from her and feel completely seen, even if you hadn't said a word. That is the energy of the High Priestess. In Carl Jung's theory of archetypes, the High Priestess isn't loud or flashy. She doesn't demand attention, but she embodies a level of emotional intelligence and intuitive knowing that unsettles some and mesmerizes others. She represents feminine mystery not because she's hiding something, but because she knows more than she needs to say. This is the fourth trait of an unforgettable woman. Deep intuition, a kind of insight that goes beyond logic. She doesn't need every fact to know what's true. She listens to something older, quieter, a knowing that comes not from fear or impulse, but from stillness. You've probably felt this in yourself before. That quiet voice that told you someone wasn't being honest, even when everything looked fine. That inner nudge that said, wait, just before things fell apart. That soft certainty that didn't need proof. But how often have you doubted it? Overridden it? Chosen someone else's opinion over your own inner truth? We live in a world that worships logic. That demands certainty. That teaches us to measure, track, analyze, until there's no space left for instinct, especially if you're a woman. You've likely been told you're too sensitive, too emotional, too much. So you start to filter everything through someone else's judgment. You begin to silence your own wisdom to fit into someone else's system. But the women who leave a mark, the ones who linger in memory long after they're gone, they move differently. They trust their knowing. They don't second-guess their gut every time it contradicts what looks good on paper. They ask questions not to interrogate, but to understand. And when they speak, it's not to impress. It's because something important needs to be said. A woman like this can walk into a conversation and change the energy without raising her voice. Not because she's mysterious in a manipulative way, but because her mind is quiet enough to listen for the truth beneath the noise. Her mystery doesn't come from holding back. It comes from having more depth than can be instantly understood. She's not unreadable. She's layered. And that's what draws people in, especially men. Because the feminine mystery isn't about playing games, it's about inviting curiosity. It's about making someone want to know more, not because you're keeping secrets, but because you are deep enough that you can't be fully understood at first glance. She's like the moon, not a reflection of someone else's light, but a presence with her own rhythms, her own gravity. She doesn't burn, she glows. What would it look like if you trusted your intuition more than approval? If you made choices based not on what others expected, but on what felt deeply, quietly, right? Imagine letting your inner voice lead not because it makes sense to everyone, but because it's yours. That's not rebellion, that's wisdom. And here's the secret. People crave this kind of presence. They don't always know why, but they feel it. They feel safe, understood, seen. Not in the way that spotlights someone's flaws, but in the way that says, I see who you are underneath the noise, and I'm still here. That's the High Priestess in you. She doesn't need to be everything to everyone. She just needs to be deeply, unmistakably herself. And that is unforgettable. She told him, calmly, that she enjoyed their time together, but she didn't need him, not in a cold way, not as a test, just as a fact. She smiled, sipped her tea, and left when she was ready, not to punish, not to prove anything, but because she had other things that mattered. He didn't know what to do with that. He was used to being chased, needed, validated. But with her, he felt something else entirely. He felt chosen, not out of desperation, but out of intention. And that changed everything. That is the kind of woman who stays in a man's memory. Not because she played a part, but because she refused to betray herself to earn his attention. This is the final layer of feminine magnetism, the kind that doesn't scream, but hums with quiet power. It's the woman who is fully devoted to herself. There's a kind of self-possession that's not arrogant, but rooted. She's not constantly managing how others see her. She's not curating herself for approval. She's aligned from the inside out. That's the fifth trait, a loving self-command. She walks into the room knowing who she is and what she values. She doesn't need to be the center of attention to feel significant. Her worth isn't up for debate because she's already claimed it. But it doesn't stop there. The sixth trait, loyalty to your own soul. That means you stop twisting yourself into shapes that make others comfortable. You stop abandoning your truth just to maintain peace. You stop saying yes when your body is screaming no. That kind of devotion is rare. And it's disarming. Because most people, men included, are used to relating to women who are constantly adjusting, accommodating, compromising just to be seen. But when you meet someone who chooses herself first, not out of selfishness, but out of deep integrity, it creates a pause. A man may not know why she feels different, but he feels it. Because her presence doesn't say, I'll become whatever you need. It says, I already am who I am. And then, there's the seventh trait, the quietest one, the most radiant, inner joy. A joy that isn't performative. A joy that doesn't need to be posted, praised, or proven. A joy that exists because she knows how to delight in herself, her world, her solitude, her growth. She doesn't date because she's lonely. She doesn't dress to be seen. She doesn't laugh for approval. She enjoys life because she wants to, because she's alive to it. That's the kind of joy that lingers in the air. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to be accepted. For many women, that mask gets heavy. It's the polished version, the agreeable version, the desirable version. But when you let go of that mask, when you begin to live from the inside instead of constantly performing on the outside, you become someone different. Not just to others, to yourself. You feel lighter, stronger, clearer, because now you're not operating from fear or lack. You're moving from self-trust. That's what individuation means, what Jung saw as the true path to wholeness. You stop living out someone else's idea of you, and you start becoming who you were always meant to be. So ask yourself honestly, what would it look like if you chose yourself every time? Not because it's trendy, not because it's a statement, but because you finally realize that nothing is more magnetic than a woman who is whole within herself. She's not waiting to be rescued. She's not performing for applause. She's not trying to earn worth through love. She already knows she's worthy. And ironically, that's the very thing that shocks most men, because she's not looking for someone to complete her. She's looking for someone who's strong enough to meet her where she already stands. That kind of woman is unforgettable not because she's trying to be, But because she finally stopped trying at all, these traits aren't tricks. They're not hacks. They are truths, and they've been inside you all along. You've journeyed from shadow to presence, from hiding to showing up fully, from trying to be enough to realizing you already are. You've seen that real magnetism isn't about chasing, pleasing, or performing. It's about coming home to yourself. From embracing your darker parts, to receiving with grace, to standing in emotional truth, to trusting your intuition, to choosing yourself without apology. This is the path. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been. You don't need to be more. You just need to be, and that's unforgettable. If this stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. What trait are you awakening in yourself today? And subscribe if you're ready to keep growing with us. There's more waiting for you, and you're already on the way.